potentially therapeutic this medicine was, this plant was. And the more I researched it, the more I found out we clearly know how safe it is.
Right.
You know, and from that point on, the patients, we all bonded pretty well. I mean, it was a great experience for the patients because they are unique in the United States, that they were able to meet each other. And just for the record, that was Bob Randall, the first patient, Irv Rosenfeld, who's alive and well. He's now the longest living patient who gets cannabis from the federal government. Elvie Masika, the longest living patient, a female patient getting cannabis from the federal government who uses it for her glaucoma. And then Corinne Millette, who is now deceased, she got cannabis from the federal government for her glaucoma. And then George McMahon in Iowa got cannabis for his problem with nail patella disorder. It's a rare genetic disorder. It leaves people really sick, and they don't tend to live much past, you know, their 50s, et cetera. But, you know, that was an amazing medicine for George. And I think that's basically it. My activism started because of patients, and once I knew patients and then know patients who could use the medicine but can't get it, it's just got me hooked. And to an extent, I'm not going to stop fighting until it is available for every patient out there in every state. This, you know, the more we learn about cannabis, the more crazy the cannabis prohibition is. And it's not just crazy. It's forbidding anyone from growing this plant and having the benefits of this plant is really criminal. And it makes no sense in the United States to have this sort of a prohibition.
Yeah,
we know where
agree.
it comes from. I mean, you know, as far as I'm concerned, it comes from big money, whether it be big pharma and other companies who stand to lose from competition should cannabis be available out there in the marketplace, whether it be for medicine, for food, or for the fiber and oil that can be used for industrial purposes. You know, it's good, clean product, natural product, you know, good for America, good for everyone,
yes.
but competition for a lot of businesses, and I think that's one of the prime things. They just don't want this type of competition.
Well, you know, that's really a shame.
On with the story, you know, we broke away from normal in 1995. We formed Patients Out of Time, and a lot of that was because the medical issue was so clear to us. The urgency was so clear to us that these patients need the medicine. They need it now. Yes, they'd like more research. They'd like more research into which variety of the plant would be better for them, which combination of cannabinoids found in the plant would be better for them, what's the best method of delivery. They would love that sort of research. But we all know that we don't need more research to show that it's safe enough to use.
Right.
And that's kind of the urgency of the name, Patients Out of Time. Al came up with that name, and as soon as he said it, you know, we all knew that that's it. That says exactly what we want to say. Patients don't have time to wait for this BS, you know, the stalling practices that go on with the federal government, the lies that continue to this day about its safety and the therapeutic potential of the plant.
Yes.
You know, it's got to stop. And so then along with starting Patients Out of Time, the logo that we ended up with, if people haven't seen it, it's literally in the background a cannabis leaf. On top of that is a wheelchair to show patience, and on top of that you've got a clock at the 11th hour. You know, just kind of, again, showing the fact that these are real patients. They need this medicine now. Yeah, and that's our fight. And so it'll continue. I run into colleagues all the time who, you know, kind of look at me and say, you know me from my nursing days in the hospital and you know, say, you're still doing this? You know, the response is, it's still illegal. You know, so yes.
You know, and what baffles me and what I find extremely interesting is any time they have set out, the powers that be, have set out to prove the harmful effects, the studies come back with the absolute opposite results, which I find, you know,
I mean,
it would be comical if Yeah, it would be comical if it weren't hindering us so much.
In the 1970s, they did research at the Medical College of Virginia in Richmond, Virginia, again trying to show how carcinogenic it was. And so they're doing their studies on mice and looking at like lung cancer, and I believe the other might have been leukemia. But what they found was that the cannabis, the cancer cells, that the mice getting the cannabis were doing better. It seemed to be fighting the cancer, killing cancer cells, which was not what the federal government wanted to show, that this could be effective as an anti-cancer agent. So they literally shut down the studies, and they never got published. And that information was buried. This is like back in 1974. And now we've got a revival of this as researchers have learned about the human body's endocannabinoid system and its role in helping to identify cancer cells and kill the cancer cells in the human body. And they're learning more about how cannabis itself can target and kill cancer cells. So, I mean, it's amazing research, but it should have been, we should have been moving forward on that back in the 1970s instead of, now here in the 21st century.
Right. I think that the most interesting aspect of cannabis curing cancer is how it does target specifically the cancer cells, and it leaves the healthy cells unharmed. I don't think you can say that about
and again,
any
it kind
other.
Of back to this system in our body, the endocannabinoid system, but one of its huge responsibilities is maintaining balance and fighting against stressors. And so it's this system within our body on a molecular basis that recognizes that's not a good, healthy cell. And it starts this chain reaction of different, cellular effects that induces what they call apoptosis, and it means cell suicide. So here's this system in our body that in a healthy person, if it's working well, we all have cancer cells, and normally the body says, ooh, that's a bad cancer cell, and starts that chain of reactions to kill the cells. And again, this is based on this new science. I'm theorizing, as well as many clinicians are, that along the way for older people, whether our diet is poor, we've just been stressed too hard, for whatever reason, our endocannabinoid system is not able to keep up with what's happening in the human body. And, so along the way, people start developing cancer and it takes hold.
Right. Mary Lynn, I'm sorry. Can I just ask you a question? And this just came to mind. 1974 was the year that they did the Guzman studies, and they found out the effects of cannabis on cancer. Was that also the same year that the federal government, because we're talking about the same division of the federal government, and that was the Division of Health, I don't know the exact name.
Health and Human Services, the Department of Health and Human Services?
Yes, thank you. Is that the same time that they actually took out their patent as a neuroprotectant and antioxidant?
No, I don't. You know what? And please don't quote me. People can look up the patent and find it on the web, cannabinoid patent from the U.S. government. But I think that happened in the 1990s.
Okay. Very good. I was going to say that.
I do think that happened later. But, that's a valid point there. Just the fact that the federal government continues to insist that marijuana, the plant, is a dangerous plant, no medical use, highly addictive, not safe for medical use, and yet they've got a patent on cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. So, how can you say on one line that, boy, there's this good stuff here, and yet, no, the plant is not safe? It's so hypocritical. It's so frustrating.
It's very frustrating. I find it extremely frustrating when we've had more than a handful of presidents who have smoked cannabis, know the effects of it, and still stand by this regime. It's incredibly ridiculous.
I think what's really incredible, I mean, again, we're so glad to have any kind of, radio shows, anything to spread more information about cannabis, because we're based, Patients Out of Time is based in Virginia, and literally just the other day went to the city of Charlottesville was considering a measure to make marijuana use the lowest priority for the police, and to send a message off to the state that they'd like the state to look at changing the marijuana laws. And we're sitting in the audience hoping to speak, but they kind of rigged it so they only had a limited number of speakers.
Oh.
Anyway, it went okay, and it did pass. But it passed despite the fact that as the council people were discussing this, it was very clear there's still, most Americans, even if they see that there's medical value, they're still suffering from the brainwashing they've gotten over the years growing up with the marijuana prohibition. For instance, I'll always say, patients out of time, we'll always call it cannabis. That's the proper name of the plant. It's an old, century-old medicine used throughout the world. And it was, I'm going to have dogs barking.
That's all right.
Okay. Settle down. Anyway, yet it was the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, the Reef Madness campaign that got that passed, that we're living in today. Cannabis was a medicine back then. Our doctors were using it as medicine. In fact, one of the, speaking of mothers, one of the funny, I've got an old bottle of Eli Lilly tincture of cannabis. The Eli Lilly company that's still alive and well as a pharmaceutical company, they had a tincture of cannabis. And one of its uses, besides migraines and using it for habits of morphine, to fight addiction to morphine and other things, it was used for